Good Sunday? Excellent, excellent. I am Dr. Eric Wesselin, a professor of psychology at Illinois State University. One of my many interests is connecting psychology topics to popular culture. I also grew up here in the Quad Cities, so it's a lot of fun to be back and contributing to the growing con culture. Today's panel celebrates the distinguished careers of two folks who have made a major impact on shaping the trajectory of modern family and youth-oriented television. They have earned over 700 produced credits between them. They have been showrunners together and individually on 14 series, though perhaps best known for their work on X-Men the Animated Series, which we highlighted in yesterday's panel. And you can see the image of the book that they co-authored there. They've also worked on a diverse lineup of other shows that many people who grew up in the last few decades may remember. It would take the entire panel for me to list off all of them, so I'll highlight just a few. So Street Fighter the Animated Series, which I believe was for USA.
Yes.
Yep. RoboCop Alpha Commando, Skeleton Warriors, Disney afternoon shows such as Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, and of course Gale's Rescue Rangers, which has just had a revisiting. The live action show Young Hercules with Oscar nominee Ryan Gosling early in his career. So
very early in his career.
So without further ado, please help me welcome our special guests, Eric and Julia Lewalds. So your career profiles are massive. I could easily do an entire panel on any one of the shows. So what I've tried to keep my questions sort of more general, kind of on a few different shows. I will keep my questions on X-Men to a minimum since we did that yesterday, but you can always feel free to weave it back that way if you want to. So maybe we'll just start out with the generally origin stories. How did you get into working in animation?
Well, I did first, so I'll go first. I grew up loving movies and got a cinema studies degree at the University of Tennessee, which I was one of the first couple guys to do that, which is a real challenge. Get a degree like that in East Tennessee. And started trying to work in really low budget movies, which is all we had. We were starving students, so that's what you work at. And actually was able to sell one of our first movies out in Hollywood back in 1977 when Star Wars was coming out. I was 22 and we somehow made a sale on this, what used to be called a drive-in movie. And so I kept writing with a bunch of my friends from Tennessee and came out to Los Angeles, finally saved up the money in '82, trying to break into the business. It's a difficult business. Julie can tell you that they usually say it takes you at least 5 years to get your first sale, which is an awfully long time. But luckily, in late '84, a neighbor of mine said, they're hiring a lot of people in Hanna-Barbera right now. They just got a big order. It used to be they'd order 13 episodes of the Smurfs or something, and they'd do that once a year. And suddenly they thought, we'll put these on the afternoon 5 days a week. So instead of ordering 13, we'll order 65. And the era of syndication, they called it, happened right there in the mid-'80s. And so I had a stack of stuff I've been writing for the last 7 or 8 years. And my neighbor took it into his boss. He said, yeah, he's okay. He could pitch to us on some of our shows that they were doing. It was included like Scooby-Doo, that sort of thing. And that was the big break. I mean, getting your foot in the door like that, so that they'll read your stuff is huge. And a buddy of mine from Tennessee and I pitched a few story ideas to a Transformers competitor called Challenge of the GoBots, which was also a toy-based transforming vehicle show from a competing company. And one of them hit, and we ended up each getting 6 assignments on that 65 episode show because we really got along with the bosses and learned animation really quick because we really didn't know it. It wasn't what we came out for, but I figured, heck, a check is a check, and now we got our foot in the door writing. And it just kind of expanded and blew up from there. And as Eric mentioned, I've worked on maybe 47, 48 different series. And, oh yeah, here, if we can go.
Just to give you a sample.
A few of the shows that I worked on just to give you an idea, that's about half of them. And the way it works is just, stuff comes along, or if you're on staff somewhere, say when we were in Disney, there may be 4 or 5 series going on at once, and you might get a chance to work on all 5 or 6 of them, depending on who needs a writer that week. So that was it was a lot of fun. If you like, there's a video here that plays the openings from about 20 of the shows that we worked on.
Member of the Exo Fleet, leader of a small band of E-frame pilots dedicated to freeing humanity from Neo-Sapien rule. We are the Exo Squad.
He's round and he's fuzzy, I love him because he's just Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear. Looking for fun, chasing some honeybees.
Son, young Hercules. Half god, half man, young Hercules longs to find his place in the world.
I dream, Doc.
We all dream, Harry.
I dream of monsters. It's how I did my job, but
What?
I've dreamt this monster.
The group of international crime fighters, known only by their code name, Street Fighters.
This is the story of Ducati.
Hello, Reno. I am the Tick.
These are the tales of the skeleton warriors.
When the Mercer twins moved into their new home and discovered a mysterious supercomputer, Zeus, and their lives would change forever. Zeus brought them into the dream worlds where they faced Isla, evil queen of nightmares, and her terrifying mimics.
Human intruders! Take them now!
The last bit was an X-Men intro.
I was born in Wisconsin, grew up in Texas, and as a senior in college, someone suggested she was going to go out to California and student teach in music, and they pay people to write, you like to write, you want to go to Hollywood, it's like, you can do that, you can leave where you are, and so yeah, I did that. Eric said it takes about 5 years to break in, it took me 10 years, but, and I'm pointing this out, this was in 80 to 90. It was a little easier to get by at that time, financially. These days are weird days. But the point of those 10 years was learning how to be a writer, learning how to write, learning, what makes a script work, how do you tell a story. And Eric mentioned he had a neighbor who said, yeah, I know you're writing spec scripts, you want to be a writer, this opportunity is available. I was friends with folks who were also friends with a writer at Disney TV Animation who said, I hear you want to write, you don't need an agent to come pitch, do you want to come pitch at Disney? I guess the point here is, if you have something you want to do, let folks know that you want to do it, and then do the work to have the thing that you would need to show the person about the thing you want to do. Eric had spec scripts, I had spec scripts, so going in it wasn't like, I really want to be a writer, and I've got some great ideas. I'll say the worst film or TV show you ever saw still had a script, and the greatest idea you've never seen hasn't gotten made because it didn't have a script. So from what I do, you gotta have the script, you gotta put the words on the page. And that job opportunity for me was writing for Chippendales Rescue Rangers. I didn't know any different from writing animation versus writing live action, it was just writing. And that was my way in. I would have been probably thrilled at any opportunity that came along that involved writing. But it happened to be Chippendales Rescue Rangers, and that was part of the Disney afternoon. Then that expanded out. Got to write on those shows. Then after 3 years at Disney, ended up in the freelance universe. And from there, various other things. Eric started working on X-Men. I was doing freelance scripts on things like The Mask, Men in Black, also writing on X-Men. And then getting the chance to...
We didn't write for the first Star Trek, but I just wanted to put this up because both of us, when we were little kids, this is the first show we geeked out over. And so when we met at Walt Disney with our offices next to each other, got to know each other, we had tried to out-geek each other about the original show.
And this was before the internet, so it's like, oh, you think you know Star Trek? Yeah, well, what about X? What about this? And it was, oh, okay, he knows it, because you couldn't look it up, you had to know it.
No Google.
Yeah, the Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah.
Well, so finding a fellow geek is a nice thing, and having to find a fellow geek at Disney TV Animation who wanted to be a writer. Find people who want to do what you want to do. Do what you want to do, and find people who want to do it too. It's nice to have that kind of camaraderie with people. Oh, no, I can ramble, but just, so having gotten into the industry, and then having survived the industry, and then looking back and realizing we've actually, each of us, continued to work in animation for a number of years, and live action, and just so grateful, and the fact that we're here talking about anything that either one of us ever worked on, with the kind of affection for something like X-Men, but also, you mentioned the Chippendales Rescue Ranger movie that just came out. It's like, oh, I worked on that, not as a showrunner, but as a writer of several of the episodes. And to see that that's treated with fond affection by people, it's like, oh my God, this is huge. Because again, Star Trek was so instrumental in shaping who I am, and here we are still talking about Star Trek. To be a part of something that shaped anybody else is huge.
Well, actually, the episode of Chippendales that's prominently featured in the movie, right?
Yes, which was one of her episodes.
When You Fish Upon a Star. If you see the movie on Disney Plus, they reference several specific episodes of the show. That's part of the humor of it. And I think I wrote half of the ones they mentioned. And specifically, When You Fish Upon a Star is one I wrote. So it's, oh my God, that would notice they didn't call me, or I haven't gotten any checks in the mail, but that's okay. That's okay.
We'll make sure and you post this video and boost it with a hashtag. So you mentioned working on both live action and animation in your careers. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of how the two compare, maybe how they're different?
You might not think about it, but writing animation, when you finish writing an animated script, you're handing it off to several other people who will then have to animate it. And unlike a live action show with the director, okay, all the actors are there, the settings are there, you're on the stage, and you get to move the actors around as you choose to. You've got to hand off a script to a head artist supervisor who then has to split it into chunks to have other artists do it. You've got to put as much, I don't mean direction, but you have to write as much information as you can in the script so that all the artists understand what every other artist is trying to convey. And Eric, you know the numbers on this.
Yeah, we tend to be very detailed in our animation scripts because it's what ends up drawn. The storyboard for an X-Men shows about 900 drawings, 300 big pages with 3 drawings on each one as the action progresses and the number of people are jumping in and out and attacking each other and flying in and out of frame or whatever. And so, as you said, in live action, the director wants you to put the minimum of description on and just, okay, these 2 characters enter a room and have a long argument. In our case, the artists don't want to be told that. They want to see how everybody moves and who's attacking who and who's glaring at who, and stuff that the director might decide on set. So when we wrote for Young Hercules, the simple live action scripts for a 22-minute show were about 20 pages, about a page a minute. For X-Men, it was 35 to 40 pages because there was an extra 15 to 20 pages of making sure, you know, Wolverine's over here and Storm's over here and the building's about to fall on Professor X who's over there, and then, you know, see so-and-so's eyes reacting to it, and all that kind of detail we wanted to try. And again, if the director and the artist come up with something better or cooler or more exciting or bigger or whatever, that would be fine. They could just go from what we gave them, but they didn't want to just say 3 X-Men in a room and a wall falls. They really wanted us to try to lay out how all the action laid out. And that takes time and thought and more visual writing. It's actually like, you feel like you're doing more of the filmmaking in your head. Whereas, like, say, we've written sitcom scripts to try to pitch into the shows, and that's just almost all dialogue.
Right.
You know, you'll say these 4 people are at the bar, and the 5th one walks in, and they have this dialogue for 5 minutes, and everything else is pretty much left up to the director. So the highlight of writing for animation, the coolest part, is all the physical filmmaking description you get to give in, because you're handing it off to an artist who has to draw every bit of it.
So, out of the various hats that you've both worn, whether or not they say previously on X-Men, which is your favorite hat and why?
Just being able to, no, here it is. I was going to say just being able to write something, but no, my favorite part is just having written. My favorite part of the process is having completed one of the phases of a script. And the phases of the script are first idea, then pitching that idea, premise, then outline, then first draft, second draft, third draft. There are specific stages. And there is nothing more satisfying than having pitched an idea, then having the premise approved, then having the outline approved, and then having the script, writing the script and getting your notes, and then having finished. Having finished the project is the most satisfying moment. Because otherwise it really is you, head down, putting words on paper. However you do it, handwriting, computer, doesn't matter. But the process of writing, I love that, but I love having finished. That's my favorite.
Yeah. And as he's told you, we've run a lot of shows, so we've been the supervisor on those shows. When you're a freelance writer, most of our friends that write for us, you know, it's a script here, it's a script there, and you're not really guaranteed. It's kind of a tough life because you may get 20 checks this year, you may get 6, depending on if people you know and people that you feel like you could pitch to have work that year. It's like being a carpenter for various contractors. If your contractor doesn't call you, you're sitting at home waiting for the call. So that's on the tough side. The upside is if you get to be the contractor, be the supervisor on a show, and the boss says, I need 26 X-Men done in the next 10 months. And here's what's been done, here's the kind of stuff we're interested in. And now coming up with what those 26 stories are, because there's 100,000 you can pick from. They're all the 40 or 50 years of the comic books. There's stuff that you'd love to do with some of the characters that's never been done. There's stuff that Marvel may want you to do this year because they're pushing somebody new. There are all these different forces and maybe 15 people that are reading what you're pitching. And coming up with the story is, to me, the hardest by far and the most satisfying because once they say, yeah, that'll make a good X-Men story, done. You know, one called The Cure is Rogue's tempted to give up her powers as a mutant because she can't touch anybody. It's a real personal story, very basic. Once you've decided that's the core story, then the rest of it is just kind of craft. It's like, you know, give me my carpenter tools and I'll build a cabinet. And it's the same, if you've got trusted writers around you, you know, oh, okay, Julia or my buddy Len, if I give them this story, I know in 4 weeks I'm going to have something really nicely crafted that's going to make everybody happy. But the hardest part is that finding something that you think is a special X-Men show, and then say get 10 of those and you pitch them to everybody that has an interest. And by the time, you know, the Fox executive doesn't care for one and the Marvel guy just hates another one and somebody else, I mean, we'll look down, maybe 3 of those get through, get greenlit. And okay, you do that process over and over again until you get 26 approved. And you can't start writing, you got all these writers out there just chomping the bit, ready to provide you wonderful material. And they can't start to work, and the artists can't start to draw off of what they're doing until you get the episodes greenlit among people that have an interest in it. And it all starts with coming up with, or sometimes the writer's pitch to me, and so getting good ideas, getting a good enough idea that's going to make a great half-hour show. That's the hard part, the satisfying part, and the rest of the stuff, it's tough deadlines, but it is satisfying. I find the writing part satisfying because you're basically, you know, you got a challenge, you got a scene between a couple of characters, and it's not working, and you just have to fix. It's like putting out a fire. You know, you got it. It's problem solving, and that's fun. But coming up with the stories you're going to tell is just pulling my hair out.
I'm going to jump in also with a little sort of side note here, is that the work that each of us does is highly collaborative. And what he said, trying to get everybody who needs to sign off on something. And then as the writer, you've got to be able to take in the notes you're given. You have to be able to respond to the notes and explain, well, I can do that, but that's going to change this down the road, because not everyone sees everything that at the same time. I mentioned this just because, hey, everybody here, why not? We know, well, the animation universe is not huge. We know or know of most of the folks who work in it or write in it. I say the collaborative part because a talented writer was just getting tired of doing that. I just wanted to write something for herself. We have the same agent, and so she decided she was going to withdraw from animation and just go home and write what she wanted to write. And gosh darn it, she produced the Hunger Games books. It's like, well, shoot.
On her own.
On her own.
Yeah, why can't we do that? We have the same agent.
Yeah, where's my idea? You know, but I'm just so. But in that process, it also shows you that that kind of thing is possible. Writing that way is possible. It is, and don't think she didn't get notes ultimately for her work with the Hunger Games. But it's a different kind of writing, and be aware that if you're doing anything like this, you're part of a giant team, whether you want to be or not.
Big themes of collaboration, persistence, and flexibility, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't, at the very beginning of writing for all these different people who have an interest in it, it even comes down to, the toy manufacturers who are putting up all the money, want to see 3 or 4 new characters in your story you hadn't planned for, or don't like what you did with one of, the Porsche shouldn't be, that kind of a German, or whatever you've written. So you've got this whole other entity giving you notes. And the biggest challenge is if you have 6 important respected people giving you notes, and they're all conflicting. Each one cancels the other one out.
And it happens.
And it happens. And you just have to become a diplomat. So you're sitting in the United Nations and people are throwing shoes at each other, and you're in the middle and you say, okay, none of those 6 things work. How about the 7th alternative? This thing kind of in the middle.
Our Star Trek quote.
Yeah, because there were 2 or 3 times in the original series where, Spock is saying one thing, and McCoy is saying another thing, and Scotty's saying, and they're arguing, and they can't agree, and each one seems just failed. And Kirk pounds his fist and says, "Gentlemen, I need that 3rd alternative."
That's our phrase.
Yeah,
I need that 3rd alternative.
It's an absolute Star Trek quote. But yeah, something that neither one of you thought of, that none of you thought of yet, that kind of satisfies all of you, that maybe isn't what you would have thought of in the first place, and that you can all live with. Once in a while, it actually gets better. But most of the time, it means like, okay, what I thought I was really sharp, but none of the other people like it. And so I've thought of this alternative thing, which works 80% as well for me. And they're all going with it, and they can all live with it. And 6 months later, when you see it all put together, and other people have added to it, and the voice person has done a little twist on it, and the editor has trimmed it a little, and whatever, all these things have, till it's done. A lot of the fights, you look back, why did I fight so hard for that? Or yeah, what I had seemed really important at the time, or seemed precious, and what's there is just great. I was stupid to push it so hard, so you can't just give in and say, oh sure, whatever you say, sir. We've been in a lot of those situations where the people with the power to make the decisions don't respect folks working in the trenches, tell them to do stuff, ruins the stories, ruins the show, and it's, they just look at you and say, well, it's our money, do your job. And those don't work out very well.
What Eric just said, though, and speaking of the collaborative process, in our neck of the woods and what we do, it tends to come down to business. And there tends to be a person in charge of the money. And that tends to be the person you need to be answering to directly. And you can have a lot of people who disagree with that person, and you may not always agree with that person, but just giving you a heads up that you've got to keep that person as happy as possible. That's your job. As a writer, it's my job to make the story editor look good. And as a story editor, it's my job to make the producer look good. So just trying to keep as many people above you as happy and content as possible, that's what the situation is.
All the time while you're living with the creative process of writing the story, because that's a real personal thing. That's a private thing. You're doing it in your office by yourself and making it come alive and feeling good about it. And then you go into the meeting and say, well, and it's like, chop off this third. and you just got to get used to that. It was hard at first, but that's just it. If you want it to be completely in your control, self-publish, write poetry, do something for yourself.
Do a blog. There are so many more ways to get your word out there.
All sorts of ways to where you're not suffering from having to collaborate. But those things don't pay you a Hollywood salary and get you to fly out here.
I don't think animation pays us a Hollywood salary, just to be clear.
Animation doesn't quite well. But the point is, if you're working with a bunch of people that are, like the first year of X-Men probably cost $5 million to produce, which is pretty small potatoes for a whole season. I think. I'm guessing, the newer one in the 220s will be 2-3 times that. But somebody's risking that money, they don't know if it's going to be successful. They don't know if what we're telling them is real, or if it's going to work, or it's not going to work. We can't really predict. You just have to have kind of faith. And so you've got to listen to the person that's risking all our money to allow you to have a creative career, in effect, and do what you can. And part of listening to them, part of being good to them, is listening to them and telling them that we think they're really terribly wrong when you do, when you think that. And the good people listen. The good people understand that they hired us for some reason. They hired us because they trusted us. And there were a couple episodes we got notes back from Marvel saying, this is like the worst thing you guys have sent us. And we just went back and said, you don't have to trust us on this one. We all believe in this story, and we're not going to drop it just because you don't quite hit it yet. I mean, we said it nicer than that.
But also because Marvel did not have Final Cut because they didn't have the most money involved. Just making that clear too.
Yeah,
it's a different world today.
They were a little company. They were a little struggling company back then. Now, there's probably not a breath or a period or a comma in any of their movies or TV shows that they haven't approved, because they're the biggest participant and it's their baby. But when we were doing it, luckily, our bosses were Fox. And so if we made them happy, it got through. And that meant they had a couple executives and their broadcast standards person who had to look after the fact that it's broadcast television. You guys grew up, when it was just broadcast TV stations. They take very seriously what kids watch, and there are very strict rules. And so if our broadcast person hadn't been so enlightened, the X-Men might never have been able to shoot I-beams at anybody, or knock a building over, or get angry at each other. I mean, different people are tighter about stuff. But she understood the books, and she said, run with it, this is what we've committed to. And that's a crucial point. That's the one, you can get around some people, you cannot get around the censor. You gotta make her happy, take her out to dinner.
But we never did. Never had to issue. No, it was, yeah.
It's all wonderful advice. I feel like you should write a how-to book. The title should be the third alternative, or something riffing on the third alternative.
I like that. I like it.
Yeah.
Because writing, in this kind of writing, we're touching on two things here. The creative side of it, which is fulfilling and all that wonderful stuff. But in a career like this, it's also the managerial side of things. Managing your own time, managing expectations, managing what people are throwing at you. So it is a balancing act. And yeah.
And in other things, people have been used to this, like writers that used to write, having a career of writing for magazines. They knew it wasn't their magazine. It's their column in the magazine, and they were handing it in to somebody that they had to satisfy, their editor. And if the editor didn't like it, you wouldn't get paid for it, and it wouldn't run in the magazine. So if you're a professional writer, you get used to getting along with everybody and listening to the needs of the people that you're working with. But speaking of writing a book, we wrote this one, which is a history of all the stuff we talked about going through in X-Men and all the behind-the-scenes stuff. And this one's all about the art. So first one didn't have any colored pages. This is a 4-pound coffee bit book. It's all about the art of the show and production of it. This we just threw in for fun. That's us at San Diego Comic-Con with 6 helpers. Yeah, with two sons, 2 daughters-in-law about to be, and a friend.
And a niece.
Yeah, and a niece. And then the question about something's coming up, and there's a 10th one. If you have the question, everybody asks us about X-Men 97. We do have a small involvement in that. We're consulting producers on that, and we have a strict, to the death, non-disclosure agreement from Marvel saying we can't really talk about it, but just to let you know, it's coming out next year. We can say that, and that is a continuation of our show, our old show. It's not a different path, not a different universe, not different characters. It's as if you've watched our show, and this is starting up a couple months later with the same crew, which which is going to be a lot of fun for us to see, because a lot of you guys your age are putting a year and a half into making this thing, and we can't wait to see it ourselves.
Well, that's actually a wonderful segue. So I'd like to give the audience a chance to ask some questions, as long as it doesn't violate the non-disclosure agreements. If you have, feel free to.
Yeah, my name is Cameron. I'm 17, so I didn't really grow up with this, but I did at the same time. Did you know while writing this how impactful X-Men would be to minorities out of America, and how just spot on it is? It's just like, this is just us now. Like the war on race and the war on women's rights and everything, it hits, and that's why I'm getting emotional. Sorry, it touched me and my family to our core, and that's why we still are X-Men fans to this day. And you just impacted the whole, I would say, Black community. And I'm from Cedar Rapids, so on the Southwest side, you just touched our whole community when it came to that. So first off, thank you. And second, did you know how impactful it would be writing that?
We had no idea.
No, we had been challenged by the president of Fox Kids, Margaret Lesh, and Sydney Iwander, her executive, that in writing on this show, you do not write down to kids. You act as if this is a live action, hour-long primetime drama. That's the level we want you to aim for. And coming out of the children's animation I've been working on, it's like, oh my gosh, we've been given the keys to the kingdom. We've been given an opportunity I'd never had before in writing for what is a kid's cartoon on Saturday morning. And we took that and ran. And we had so much, it was so wonderful to have that opportunity, and writing as hard as we could about these kinds of topics under the guise of science fiction, fantasy, and saying, oh, okay, the story, the mutant virus story, which all these stories are going, okay, as long as we couch it in these terms of superheroes and things like that, we can tell some really pointed commentary on things. And I was sort of joking about 5 years ago, talking to folks, as things were happening in the world, it's like, did none of you watch the X-Men? Did you learn nothing?
You've had 30 years to figure this out. How come things aren't any better? Because there's a certain optimism in the series, and that we all felt in the mid-90s when we wrote this show. I mean, this is just stuff pouring out of us and out of the artists that seem contemporary, like when we're doing the virus show, the AIDS epidemic had just happened, and the shunning of gay people and anybody who thought might have AIDS, and it was killing people, and it was dividing the society. And what I think within a few months of us starting writing the show, the Rodney King riots happened. So all that was really in the air when we were doing the show, because from the writer's point of view, we just were trying to tell the most dramatic stories we possibly could while respecting the characters we were given. And the great gift of that from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby for thinking these guys up back in '63 was you had this group that was an other, that was a feared and oppressed minority that were your lead characters. And we had a big discussion, myself and my writing buddy Mark Evans, who helped play out the first few seasons. And I even called Marvel and told them what we were doing. I said, I've looked back through the books the best I can, as quick as I can, and there seem to be two competing kinds of stories. There's some books, comic books, that are just, no, I'm bigger, no, I'm bigger, no, I'm bigger, and they beat the heck out of each other for 30 pages, and one wins, and then the island falls into the sea. Okay, that's kind of like, I love live wrestling, but that's kind of like wrestling. And the other part was the thing that Stan got, because I know Stan and Jack, I mean, Stan people were Jewish, they got through the Holocaust and the Depression, these guys, and so they sensed, what it was to be other. And so I'm sure that informed their writing. So I'm looking at their stuff and, okay, these people are other, and it even got better in the 70s when they were reimagined, because the first X-Men are basically a bunch of white teenagers. And the book kind of died, and in the mid-70s when they redid it, somebody at Marvel, and our friend Glenn Lee, who was working there and hated Wolverine, said he remembered it as an accountant saying, "We sell better overseas." And so the editor said, "Why don't we make the new X-Men international?" So first it became a Canadian Wolverine, and Russian Colossus, and German Nightcrawler, and African Storm, and et cetera, et cetera. So in building the new X-Men, their new mandate was to make them international, which really, again, helps touch the entire world and not have it be exclusively, white American teenagers. And so all that was handed to us, and this basic situation of, if we're not that interested, we don't care that much if Juggernaut can beat up the Hulk. It's not what we're worried about in the story. Even though that's fun, we love that when we're 9. What we're looking at is our lead characters are trying to find a way to fit in greater society, which reasonably fears them. And Guido just sits everybody down and says, "Of course these people are afraid of you. You know how different you are. You know how powerful you are. It doesn't matter how nice you are, Charles. You're not going to talk them into being nice and having an easy assimilation and forget that you're mutants. They're not going to forget. This is something you guys need to work at."
But also because they were born that way.
Yeah, and they were born that way. It wasn't a choice. It was, okay, we're born this way. So the minority really grab onto this. The gay community really grabs onto this, saying, why are you hating me? I didn't do anything to you. I'm just different. And so, yes, over the cons, we've noticed that there's a huge minority set of understand, and people from other cultures. We've talked to Brazilians come up to us. People in Singapore grabbed us at the airport and wanted to talk about X-Men because it meant so much to them growing up. The daughter of Rodney King's attorney wrote an article in LA Times about 3 years ago saying, Chris Darden's daughter, saying, "You don't understand, my dad was suffering through this thing, and there was all this tension and all this hatred, and I'd run home when I was 13 and watch the X-Men."
Because Thorne was there, and
Yeah.
there were strong characterizations. I wanted to loop back, though. You were saying you and Mark Edens in writing the first 2 episodes and setting up the series. If you go back and look at Night of the Sentinels, it doesn't begin with, "I'm a stronger mutant than you're a stronger mutant." It begins with the newscast of, there looks to be a mutant out there causing problems with the police car, and it's Sabretooth. But then, so you're setting up humanity's response to mutation, to difference. And then from there, you don't even see Magneto until the 3rd episode. What you've seen in those first 2 episodes is the political angling and Jubilee's line, why do you hate us? And the response, the straight response, "You were born." Boom, and then from there, then you can go on and have the conversations within that world of how you get along with people, how you don't get along with someone, why you would choose to do this, why would you choose to do that. It wasn't a fight 'em up of the week. It was a bigger examination of issues that we shouldn't have to still be dealing with.
And the thing you mentioned about women's rights, it was just by chance. It wasn't like a feminist statement on our part. But when we looked, there were 29 people from 1963 to 1992, 29 different characters that had been members of the X-Men. And we had to pick 7 or 8 that would be the current X-Men, the current team. And we got input from various people like Marvel, but we were just looking for the 8 people that were as different from each other as humanly possible, that had different powers, that had different looks, that had different backgrounds, that had different personalities, so that it wasn't just like 8 G.I. Joes. And in doing that, we had the various ethnicities, but ended up with 4 women and 4 men, and Charles Xavier was our core cast. And all sorts of women come up and say, what it meant to be growing up, being a girl, and finally seeing a lead hero that was me. And it was just...
it truly was a happy convergence of so many things. And the fact that if you examine each of the lead members of the team, the thing that makes them the strongest at what, or the best at what they do with their mutation, we often talk about this, is the thing that also is the most human, hardcore, heartbreaking moment for them.
Like Rogue.
If you swap Rogue's powers with Wolverine's, she would be happy to retract her claws, you know, and she'd fight you if she had to, but you know, she could live that way. And Wolverine can't touch somebody, fine, he'll go live in the woods the rest of his life, he doesn't care. But Rogue, the thing that makes her this amazing character is her worst cross to bear, that she cannot be physically intimate with someone. And each one of them, a beast, the one who is so rational and so able to intellectualize this stuff. He's the one who can't walk down the street without someone pointing, oh, look at that weird blue thing, you know, and it just, I love that about each of these characters, that each of them is amazing and powerful, but also has this deep wound inside.
And there's a happenstance, the head artist, Larry Houston, who supervised all the artists, was the first African-American to do storyboards for Saturday morning cartoons. It started in the mid-70s, it hadn't been before that. And so I'm sure he had a sensitivity to this, like when we're looking for new characters. I think he pushed Bishop, which is great, because Bishop was
swap
perfect.
out in Days of Future Past when we couldn't use Kitty Pryde, yeah.
And for the future series for '97, Bo DeMaio, who's the young showrunner, African American. It seems to fit with the show that people that are aware or sensitive to what it means to be other or minority are attracted to the show, and it's just, yeah, it's something we were handed when we said, you guys get to do the X-Men. And it was a great gift, because to me, it makes, as a straight white male, it makes for great storytelling.
And so I love like all the different things that you're discussing are, you know, themes that when I teach my psychology and X-Men class, the students resonate with in various ways. There's the character angles that connect to psychology, but there's also socio-political angles. One of the things that I really resonated with when you were talking is the point of optimism, sort of the core of optimism, right? And when I close my class at the end of the semester, I always show graduation day. And then I use one of my favorite quotes from one of the first two episodes of the second season, but in Storm. And it's when the Friends of Humanity are surging, and Storm, Professor Xavier, Jubilee, and Jubilee sort of opining why things have gotten worse. And Storm says, I'm probably going to butcher the quote a little bit, but for every human who gives in to hate and fear, there are hundreds who are willing to see the truth, and there's the future. And that's what I sort of end with to send the students forth, right? And so, and actually, we're about out of time, so maybe that's a good mic drop, that please, audience, you be the future.
All three of you, come talk with us at the table.
Yeah, we're
talk more with us
we're
at the
down
table.
at the table in quarter till 4 o'clock. So.
And then where can they find you online?
We've got cards. Okay, X-Men TAS, and that's for X-Men the Animated Series. That's us with our website, that's us on Twitter, that's us on Instagram, just X-Men TAS. So please reach out to us.
Yeah, and we've got website.
Yeah.
I'll hand you guys some cards that have the connections on it.
Well, so thank you very much to Eric and Julia Lewalds.
I'll say that also, by setting up the series the way Eric did, the fact that, and I see it, you see the memes these days, but Magneto had a point, you know? And the way the world's going right now, it's, again, did people not watch the show? Did they learn nothing?
Yeah, talking to the new showrunner, one of his favorite lines was from an episode from the 4th season, my favorite episode called One Man's Worth, which is a time travel episode showing what would happen if Xavier if someone had gone back in time and killed Xavier when he was 20 and there had never been any X-Men.
So it's a hellscape in the future because there's been no Xavier.
So our modern day futuristic character Storm, actually a Storm from the future, right? A Storm from 2055 goes back to 1955 to save Xavier from being shot.
With her husband, Wolverine, they're happy, they're married, and they're happy for 2 episodes.
And there's a bartender there that comes over and starts giving him crap for being a racially mixed table. And 2055 Storm just chuckles and says, "Huh, skin color prejudice, how quaint." It's like, it's something that is so old and forgotten in 2055.
I think it's skin color prejudice. That's so pathetic, it's almost quaint.
Yeah.
And then Wolverine comes in and goes,
"It ain't quaint." He's about to go kill the guy for dissing his wife. But yeah, that was a kind of a optimistic future thing, that even though there's a hellscape in the future and people are fighting each other, they're past skin color prejudice. Yeah, that's old news.
Well, I don't think anybody's coming out of among the last panel. So actually, I was talking to Larry Houston about that episode, because that was an episode that I missed when I was a kid, and then caught when I was in college.
Oh, okay.
And was just blown away at a different level. And Larry was telling me that episode, Wolverine and Storm, the first interracial marriage in animation, right?
Yeah.
as far as we've been able to research and determine, yeah.
And we're just doing it for fun. We thought it's 2055, it's the future, it's 60 years in the future. And these characters have gone on a separate timeline, and they're in the middle of a fight, and wouldn't it be cool if they had wedding rings and they're man and wife, and it just, for some reason, the two characters and the two actors were really natural. They just had a real chemistry.
And the hard thing is, in that two-parter, is they're in love, they're married, they're committed to each other. Again, it's a hellscape, but they are together. But in order to save everybody else's future, they have to change they have to go back and rescue Xavier, knowing that the timeline's going to play out differently and they won't be together.
They won't be together.
So, oh my God. So for that, yes, it's a hellscape and all, but the fact that it comes down to those two people being that in love, but choosing to sacrifice that for what could be the betterment of those around them, that's the thing that kills me about that episode. You know, it was good, darling. It was the best tough guy. And then, you know, but yeah, so even that giant, huge story that became, by the way, the Age of Apocalypse books, when you pitched the idea, you came up with that story.
It kind of became the scenes for Age of Apocalypse. They loved it at Marvel. They thought, oh, this is cool. Let's run with it. And they came up with these like 6 series of,
But so in pitching it, and then time travel stories are tough. They're challenging. And you went back doing research for the books and discovered that One Man's Worth, normally scripts are premised to final draft, you got 4 weeks.
Yeah.
What?
We spent about 8 months. Because everybody, time travel it's not really logical. There's always a way, if it's over here, it really should be over here. If that happens, that couldn't have happened. You go back and forth and pull your hair out. And so that really, that story bounced back and forth for 8 months instead of the usual month to month and a half that you've got to think through a story and get a script final. And so finally it got done. But I saw a bunch of notes from important colleagues saying, I don't know if we can just throw this one out.
But that's also why Age of Apocalypse, the books, the way everything timed out, the series of the books came out
just about the same time.
And a lot of people think One Man's Worth was based on Age of Apocalypse, but the truth is it's the other way around. But Larry Houston got to use some of the artwork from the Age of Apocalypse series. There are some amazing cameos that just flash by if you watch that episode. You know, Gambit missing an arm. It's like, oh my God, what does the card man do if he's missing an arm? You know, and Beast all tricked out with Wolverine, you know, adamantium hand claws. It's like, oh my God. But so that the books came out with their art first, but they came out because of the idea that became.
And that's so nice because we took so much from the books. It was nice to get one back.
Oh yeah, look at me. I got to work on Days of Future Past. I mean, got to work on the crown jewels of the Chris Claremont, the X-Men era. So anytime that they could come up with anything that would work for us, yay. Thank you all so much. This was fun.